pilots fails, we can have karaoke. When you're invited to a new place, how do you get there? Do you look at a GPS? Do you consult an atlas? If you're a woman, do you ask directions? Whatever you do, you're relying on the assumption that places are where they're supposed to be, and you're relying, whether you realize it or not, on maps. Humans have been mapping the world for centuries. Early maps, like this 13th century map mundi, was about trying to make order of a big, confusing world, and those early map makers weren't really that bothered about getting it right and an accurate representation. Instead, they used imagination to fill in the blanks. Later, map makers wanted to use maps to control territory. People of Donegal knew this very well. In 1603, they beheaded the Queen's cartographer, Richard Bartlett, because they didn't want him finding out about their country. And it's not just Donegal. Maps and wars have been connected for centuries. This is the most recent example from 2010, when Nicaragua used an inaccurate Google map as justification for their invasion of Costa Rica, saying it's on the map, it's our territory, and we're going in. We all have an image of the world in our heads, and we think of it as fact, but maps are, of course, distortions. That's what happens when you take 3 dimensions and turn them into 2. This is a Mercator projection. It was radical in the 16th century because it showed true direction, but in order to do that, it distorted shapes. So here's a correction of that. This is the Gall-Peters projection, which preserves the relative area of countries, so they're in relative proportion to each other, but it distorts the shape of the countries, which is what gives you this washing line effect. And when we think of maps as representing shapes, we can also use maps to think differently about the world that we live in. So here, the map is used to represent the differences in GDPs across regions and countries of the world, and it shows the distorting effect of wealth on the world that we live in. Or here, where you take maps and you equate the size of a territory with the number of people living there. If you do that, then Russia becomes China, China becomes Indonesia, Canada becomes India, but Ireland, Brazil, Yemen, and the US all remain in the same place. But there's a hidden politics to maps too, and maps are used to give across different messages. Here's a 19th century representation of Ireland as a woman with a simian-featured child on her back, and a map of the threat posed to the world by communism in the 1930s. You see the colour red appearing there, and here again in a 2010 map of Afghanistan that's designed to look old, where red, the colour red, is used to signify the danger posed by terrorists in Afghanistan. But the politics of map making is here overt, but sometimes a little more satirical. Here's a map of Africa according to the Americans in the swathe of desert and illness and hunger. You also get celebrities like Madonna and Obama and a little bit of South African bling. Or in the next map that you're going to see, which is a map of Europe according to the French, in this map we're the Catholics, but at least this time we're not the poorest savages, the noisy, hairy people, or the slayers of virgins. But beyond that, maps can move beyond politics to help you in your quest for love and romance and just a good time. Here's a map of virgins in the US according to online dating profiles. The lighter the colour, the more people describe themselves as virgins in particular states. Or if you want to go more specific, here's a map of dating profiles in the Bronx. So these are the words people use to try and attract attention. They describe themselves as rampant, or cheaters, or umbrellas, or beans. And if these are a little bit too romantic for you, you can always take a more utilitarian approach to thinking about love. Depending on what you're looking for, you might want to avoid Ireland and maybe your next holiday and go instead to Hungary or France. And when you get there, do take advice from this determined cartographer of love who charts the path that you're going to follow from the mountains of melancholy through the valley of disdain and misery marsh until you get to your final hopeful destination, Honeymoon Island on the Sea of Matrimony. And if all this talk of love is wrong at the time of Christmas, you can instead think about maps as charting out your life. Here's the world of experience going from spring growth and summer change all the way through the mountains of work to end up at winter and, of course, uncharted territory. But go back to the politics of map, and here's a map of the world that changes the way that we think about the world and puts Australia at its rightful place at the centre of the world. And that goes back to an 11th century pattern when Arab cartographers, who were the most skilled cartographers, mapped the world with this orientation. A few centuries later, when European cartographers took over, they changed the orientation of the map. They put north at the top, and in doing so put Europe at the centre of and at the top of the world. So the map that we take for granted now is the product of centuries of political fighting. So where does that leave us? All maps are distorted. Every map can be manipulated. Even Google gets it wrong. Where you think you are is not necessarily where you are. Maps just give you new ways of getting lost.